Hello and welcome to News Now. I'm your host, Taylor Inman. We're going over the week's biggest headlines for Northwest Montana. During a stop in Evergreen on Wednesday, Governor Greg Gianforte signed into law a bill that expands the state's authority to police illegal hiring practices. Under the law, the Montana Department of Labor and Industry can audit employers for documents such as I-9 forms that are used to verify an employee's legal working status. Representative Courtney Sprunger, a Republican from Kalispell, introduced the measure during the 2025 legislative session. The bill passed both houses with bipartisan support. Sprunger said, quote, "If anyone is using illegal labor, it is not a victimless crime," following the bill's signing at Flathead Electric Cooperative on June 18th. She held up local contractor Bill Miles as proof. Miles approached Sprunger about drafting a bill after he said his business, quote, "dropped by 71% due to all the illegals here working," end quote. Under the law, employers face a fine of up to $2,500 for each unverified employee they hire and may have their business license suspended after a third violation. Employees refusing to provide requested documentation would also be subject to a fine. While employers can face fines and penalties, the law does not provide guidance on how the state should address employees found working without verification. Whether the audits become another tool in the enforcement of the Trump administration's deportation policies remains to be seen. Gianforte said the state has made other efforts to support federal immigration policies, including letting immigration officials use state and county detention centers. The governor reiterated his support for the Trump administration's stated goal of targeting violent criminals such as gang members. He said, quote, "People who have crossed into this country illegally have committed a crime, and there's ones that have gone further. And what the Trump administration has said is that they're going to go after the worst of the worst first, and that's what they have done," end quote. Crossing into the United States illegally is a civil offense. Of the new crackdowns on illegal hiring practices, Gianforte said employers needed to be held accountable, quote, "to hire people who can actually have the constitutional right to work here." Judge Amy Eddy flatly rejected Derrick Jackson's story of self-defense in the deaths of his mother and her partner while sentencing the convicted killer to 100 years behind bars on Tuesday. A Flathead County jury in April found the 39-year-old Jackson guilty of deliberate homicide for the October 28, 2022 murder of 65-year-old Stanley Grotberg, but acquitted him of killing his mother, 62-year-old Tricia DeMotts. Authorities found the pair shot to death in their Bigfork home after arresting Jackson with a gun on a neighbor's property earlier that day. Testifying at the double homicide trial, Jackson accused Grotberg of fetching the gun during an argument and using it on his mother. He recounted holding DeMotts in his lap as she died and later retrieving the gun and turning it on Grotberg, who he claimed to charge at him. Jackson and his defense team, attorneys Thomas Scholenben and Levi Rodman, clung to that version of events while arguing for a partially suspended 20-year sentence on June 17th. Speaking before the court, Jackson began remorsefully apologizing for his role in what he described as a tragedy, but he soon veered to blame Grotberg for DeMotts' death. Then he launched into a lengthy diatribe about Grotberg, who he described as not a good man, recounting him previously acting disrespectful around DeMotts and threatening to have Jackson's father killed. Jackson also mused on how things might have turned out differently if he had not been recovering from a car wreck at the time of the killings. Rodman drew on Jackson's account in seeking a lessened sentence. He said if Jackson didn't kill his mother, there is only one other person that could have, Grotberg. But Eddy deemed Rodman's argument fantastical. She said, quote, "I understand that the jury found the defendant not guilty of count 1, deliberate homicide of his mother, Tricia DeMotts. The jury also rejected as frankly incredulous the defendant's theory of self-defense. Primarily that DeMotts was shot, that he pulled her into his lap, cradled her on the bed before she was shot again, but had none of her blood on him," end quote. She cited Jackson's criminal history, 4 felony convictions, 7 misdemeanor convictions, and 8 revocation proceedings, his high likelihood of reoffending, poor behavior while incarcerated to include a foiled escape attempt, and failed attempts to deceive mental health evaluators at the Montana State Hospital as reasons for the lengthy sentence. She said in her 10 years on the bench, she has never seen a report from the state hospital that said the defendant was feigning or exaggerating symptoms to avoid accountability, in addition to not having any mental illness or disorder. Calling for Jackson to receive the maximum penalty, Eric Grotberg testified that his father's murder had devastated and traumatized his family. His sons had lost friends over media coverage of the case and struggled at school, he said. The court also heard from Jackson's father, John Jackson, who testified that his son had grown remorseful since the trial. John Jackson told the court he believed his son's story that he had killed Stanley Grotberg after Grotberg shot DeMotts dead. He said Jackson loved his mom. For Grotberg's death, Jackson received 80 years in Montana State Prison with an additional 10 years for using a firearm. For tampering with evidence, picked up for ditching the gun used in the shootings, Jackson received 10 years. Eddy ordered the sentences to run consecutively, designated Jackson as a persistent felony offender, and gave him credit for 952 days of time served. 5 people were arrested and 1 injured in a pedestrian vehicle accident during the No Kings protest in downtown Kalispell on Saturday, June 14th. The demonstration was one of nearly 2,000 held across the country and 24 in Montana in opposition to President Donald Trump and his administration's policies. The Kalispell protest was organized by Flathead Democracy in 5051. Over 2,000 people attended the event, according to Leonette Galaz, an organizer with Flathead Democracy. One demonstrator walking on a crosswalk suffered a concussion and broken tailbone after being struck by a slow-moving car turning right on US 93 by Depot Park, according to Kalispell Police Chief Jordan Venezio. While the cause of the accident is still under investigation, Venezio said the collision did not appear to be intentional. No one has been charged. It'll take the Kalispell Police Department throughout the week to comb through the video evidence, he said. The collision happened while a large group of protesters were walking along a crosswalk on Main Street to make their way toward Depot Park. While protester Bobby Ashabin did not see the accident, he said he was crossing the road at the time and observed the vehicle inching forward in an attempt to make its way through the crowd. Ashabin ran over to support the pedestrian's head before law enforcement was beckoned over and first responders arrived at the scene. Shutting down Main Street to vehicles during the protest would have been impractical, according to Venezio. He said they can't close US 93 because it's too busy. He said they do the best they can with the information they have and that they only have so many resources and police officers. Law enforcement was in active communication with event organizers, but Galaz said that if police were present to direct cars amidst heavy foot traffic, the pedestrian accident could have been avoided. Venezio said 4 officers were stationed at the event and that keeping a low profile was the goal. He said they try to navigate finding the balance of having a police presence but also not having an overbearing presence to where people don't feel comfortable to express their rights to free speech. The permit allowed for the protest to start at 2:30 p.m., but Venezio said some arrived as early as 10 a.m. 5 people, both protesters and counter-protesters, were arrested throughout the day. All were charged with misdemeanor disorderly conduct and booked into the Flathead County Detention Center, according to Venezio. Law enforcement also pulled over and ticketed drivers for spewing exhaust, also known as coal rolling, over protesters. Despite the arrest and pedestrian incident, Venezio said the vast majority of the demonstration was peaceful. Thanks for joining us. News Now is a podcast from the Daily Interlake. We're proud to be the largest independent newsroom in Montana and the longest continuously published newspaper in the region. Today's stories were written by Daily Interlake news editor Derek Perkins and reporters Jack Underhill and Haley Smalley. If you haven't already, subscribe to our YouTube channel to never miss an episode of the pod. Everybody stay safe and have a great week. Thanks to our sponsor, Lawrence Auto Repair at 1309 US Highway 2 in Kalispell. Most consistently rated 5-star shop serving the Kalispell area. Visit lawrenceauto.com.